Let me start with something that might surprise you. Some of the foods you believe are healthy could actually be quietly pushing your blood sugar higher every single day. And if you're living with diabetes or prediabetes, those small spikes add up, damaging your nerves, your eyes, your kidneys, and your heart over time. As a diabetes specialist, I've seen many patients doing their absolute best, eating what they think are the right foods, yet their glucose numbers keep climbing. The truth is not all healthy foods are healthy for people with diabetes. Today, I want to talk to you about 5 commonly recommended foods you should be careful with. Otherwise, your diabetes may get worse without you even realizing it. 1. Fruit juice, even fresh or organic. Have you ever started your morning with a glass of fresh orange juice, believing you were doing something healthy for your body, only to see your blood sugar readings unexpectedly high afterward? This is one of the most common situations I see in clinical practice. Patients are often confused because they associate fruit juice with vitamins, immunity, and natural health. What many people don't realize is that when you drink fruit juice, even freshly squeezed, organic, or without added sugar, your body processes it very differently compared to eating whole fruit. The key issue is fiber. Whole fruits contain soluble fiber that slows digestion and moderates the release of glucose into the bloodstream. Once the fruit is juiced, that protective fiber barrier is largely removed, leaving behind concentrated natural sugars that absorb rapidly and push blood glucose upward within minutes. From a metabolic perspective, fruit juice behaves almost like a sugary beverage. A single glass of orange juice may contain the sugar equivalent of 3 or 4 oranges, but without the fullness you would feel from eating whole fruit. That means you consume a large glycemic load very quickly without realizing it. I've had patients whose fasting glucose improved by 20 to 30 points simply by eliminating daily juice consumption without changing anything else in their diet. That is how powerful this single habit can be. The liver also plays a role here. Fruit juice contains fructose, which is processed in the liver, and excessive intake can contribute to insulin resistance and fatty liver over time, both of which worsen diabetes control. Another concern is the speed of absorption. Liquids empty from the stomach faster than solid foods. When sugar enters the bloodstream rapidly, the pancreas must release more insulin to compensate. For someone with diabetes or prediabetes, insulin function is already impaired, so this rapid influx creates higher spikes and longer recovery times. Repeated spikes throughout the day increase inflammation, oxidative stress, and vascular damage. This is not just about numbers on a glucose meter. It directly affects long-term complications involving the heart, kidneys, nerves, and eyes. Marketing can also be misleading. Labels such as 100% natural, no added sugar, or freshly squeezed create a perception of safety, but physiologically your body still experiences a glucose surge. Natural sugar is still sugar in terms of blood glucose response. Even juices perceived as healthier, such as green juices or smoothies containing fruit blends, can have similar effects if carbohydrate content is high. Patients often underestimate portion size as well. A tall glass may contain far more carbohydrates than expected, especially when multiple fruits are combined. A safer approach is to prioritize whole fruits in moderate portions. When you eat an apple, berries, or an orange in its natural form, chewing slows intake, fiber reduces absorption speed, and satiety signals help prevent overconsumption. Pairing fruit with protein or healthy fats such as nuts or yogurt further stabilizes blood sugar response. Hydration should come primarily from water, herbal teas, or unsweetened beverages rather than fruit juice. Small daily habits determine long-term outcomes. Something that seems harmless, even beneficial, can quietly interfere with glucose control when repeated consistently. Understanding how your body responds to foods is one of the most powerful tools in diabetes management. When patients recognize this difference between whole fruit and juice, they often see measurable improvements in energy levels, glucose stability, and overall metabolic health within weeks. 2. Brown bread and multigrain products. You might be choosing brown bread every day, believing you are making a smart, diabetes-friendly decision. After all, you've probably heard countless times that brown or multigrain bread is healthier than white bread. But here's the question I often ask my patients. If your blood sugar still rises after eating it, is it truly helping you? This is where many people with diabetes get misled. The color of bread does not determine its metabolic effect. What matters is how quickly the carbohydrates break down into glucose once they enter your body. Many commercial brown breads are made from refined flour with added coloring, small amounts of bran, or mixed grains, which still behave very similarly to white bread when digested. From a physiological standpoint, bread is primarily a carbohydrate source. When consumed, digestive enzymes rapidly convert starch into glucose, which then enters the bloodstream. If the bread lacks sufficient fiber, protein, or fat to slow this process, the glucose rise can be significant and fast. I have seen patients switch from white bread to brown bread expecting major improvements, only to find their post-meal glucose numbers unchanged. This often creates frustration because they feel they are doing everything right, yet results don't follow. The reality is that many packaged multigrain products contain multiple types of refined grains rather than intact whole grains. Multigrain simply means more than one grain was used. It does not guarantee that those grains are whole or beneficial for blood sugar control. Another important factor is portion size. Even genuine whole grain bread can raise blood glucose if eaten in excess. Carbohydrates are cumulative. 2 or 3 slices at breakfast combined with other carbohydrate sources such as tea with sugar, fruit, or spreads can create a substantial glycemic load. The body does not distinguish whether the carbohydrate came from white bread or brown bread when the total amount is high. What truly matters is the quantity and the presence of fiber that slows digestion. Whole grains with intact structure, such as oats, quinoa, barley, or minimally processed whole wheat, generally produce a slower glucose rise compared to finely milled flour products. There is also the concept of glycemic index and glycemic load, which describes how quickly foods raise blood sugar and how much carbohydrate they contain per serving. Many commercial breads labeled as healthy still have a high glycemic index because processing breaks down the grain structure. The more finely ground the flour, the faster it converts to glucose. This is why dense, high-fiber breads with visible grains tend to have a more moderate effect compared to soft, fluffy loaves. I often advise patients to shift their mindset from brown equals healthy to fiber and portion control determine impact. Reading ingredient labels becomes essential. If the first ingredient is refined wheat flour rather than whole grain flour, the product may not provide the metabolic benefits expected. Pairing carbohydrates with protein sources such as eggs, yogurt, or nut butter can also help reduce glucose spikes by slowing digestion and improving satiety. When patients become aware of how their bodies respond, sometimes by checking glucose levels after meals, they gain clarity that marketing claims cannot provide. The goal is not to eliminate carbohydrates completely, but to choose forms that support stable blood sugar rather than sudden spikes. Small adjustments in carbohydrate quality and quantity can significantly improve glucose control, energy stability, and long-term diabetes outcomes. 3. Flavored or low-fat yogurt. Let me share something that surprises many of my patients. They switch to low-fat yogurt thinking they are making a heart-healthy, diabetes-friendly decision, yet their blood sugar readings begin creeping higher without any obvious reason. This is not a coincidence. The moment fat is removed from many dairy products, manufacturers often compensate by adding sugar, flavorings, or sweeteners to improve taste and texture. So what appears to be a healthier option on the label can actually create a greater metabolic burden for someone managing diabetes. The real question is not whether a product is low fat. The real question is how it affects your glucose levels after you eat it. Yogurt in its natural form can be an excellent food. It contains protein, calcium, probiotics, and beneficial nutrients that support gut health and metabolic balance. However, flavored yogurts, fruit-on-the-bottom varieties, and many diet or low-fat options often contain significant amounts of added sugars. Some single servings can contain as much sugar as a dessert. When consumed, these sugars are rapidly absorbed into the bloodstream, triggering glucose spikes that may go unnoticed unless you are monitoring your levels. I have seen patients who eat flavored yogurt daily believing it supports weight loss or diabetes control, yet their HbA1c remains stubbornly elevated. Once they switch to plain, unsweetened yogurt, their glucose patterns often improve within weeks. There is also an important physiological reason why full-fat or natural yogurt may sometimes be more stabilizing than low-fat versions. Fat slows gastric emptying, meaning food leaves the stomach more gradually. This slower digestion leads to a more controlled release of glucose into the bloodstream. When fat is removed, that moderating effect disappears, and if sugar is added, the glucose response becomes even more pronounced. For individuals with insulin resistance, this rapid spike requires the pancreas to work harder, which over time contributes to metabolic strain. Marketing language can be particularly misleading in this category. Terms like light, healthy, low-fat, or fruit-flavored create a perception of safety, but they do not guarantee low sugar content. Many patients do not realize that lactose, the natural sugar in milk, is already present in yogurt. When additional sugars are added on top of that, the carbohydrate load increases significantly. Even yogurts labeled as honey, vanilla, or strawberry often contain syrups or concentrates that elevate glucose quickly. Reading nutrition labels carefully becomes essential, especially looking at total carbohydrates and added sugars per serving. Portion size also matters. Larger containers or family-size servings can lead to unintended overconsumption. Because yogurt is perceived as healthy, people may eat more than necessary, increasing carbohydrate intake without without realizing it. Pairing plain yogurt with fresh berries, seeds, or nuts is a much safer approach. This combination provides fiber, protein, and healthy fats that help maintain stable glucose levels while still offering flavor and satisfaction. Another factor worth understanding is satiety. Foods with higher protein and moderate fat content tend to keep you full longer, reducing cravings and preventing overeating later in the day. When patients replace sugary yogurt with plain Greek yogurt, they often report improved appetite control, fewer energy crashes, and better overall glucose stability. These changes may seem small, but repeated daily habits strongly influence long-term diabetes outcomes. Understanding the difference between marketing claims and metabolic reality empowers you to make better decisions. The goal is not to eliminate dairy, but to choose forms that support blood sugar control rather than disrupt it. Awareness, label reading, and mindful pairing of nutrients can transform what you eat from a hidden problem into a powerful tool for better diabetes management. 4. Dried fruits, dates, raisins, apricots. Many people are genuinely surprised when I tell them that dried fruits, foods often considered natural, traditional, and even medicinal, can significantly raise blood sugar levels. I frequently hear patients say, "But doctor, they're natural, so they must be safe." This belief is very common, and it comes from the idea that anything natural is automatically healthy. However, when it comes to diabetes management, what matters most is how a food affects your glucose response inside the body. Dried fruits such as dates, raisins, dried apricots, and figs may contain vitamins and minerals, but they are also extremely concentrated sources of sugar. Once the water is removed from fresh fruit, the natural sugars become densely packed into a much smaller volume, making it very easy to consume a large amount of carbohydrates in just a few bites. To understand this clearly, consider portion comparison. A small handful of raisins can contain the same amount of sugar as several whole grapes, yet it does not create the same feeling of fullness. Similarly, 2 or 3 dates may seem like a modest snack, but metabolically they deliver a significant glucose load. I have seen patients whose blood sugar spikes dramatically after eating dates during fasting periods or as evening snacks simply because they underestimated the carbohydrate content. Because dried fruits are chewy and palatable, people often eat them quickly without realizing how much they've consumed, which leads to unexpected glucose elevations. From a physiological perspective, dried fruits contain both glucose and fructose. Glucose raises blood sugar directly, while fructose is processed by the liver. Excessive fructose intake over time can contribute to insulin resistance and fat accumulation in the liver, which further complicates diabetes control. Another factor is fiber. While dried fruits do contain some fiber, the sugar concentration is so high that the fiber is often insufficient to prevent rapid absorption when eaten in larger portions. This creates a situation where blood glucose rises quickly, especially in individuals who already have impaired insulin sensitivity. Cultural habits also play a role. In many regions, dried fruits are associated with energy, strength, and recovery, and they are often recommended during religious fasting or as healthy snacks. While they can provide quick energy for people without metabolic conditions, individuals with diabetes must approach them differently. Timing, portion size, and pairing with other nutrients become critical considerations. For example, consuming a small portion of dried fruit along with nuts or protein can slow glucose absorption compared to eating it alone. However, even with pairing, moderation remains essential. Another hidden concern is added sugar. Some commercially packaged dried fruits contain additional sweeteners or syrups to enhance flavor and appearance. This further increases the carbohydrate load and glycemic impact. Patients may not notice this unless they carefully read ingredient labels. Even products marketed as premium or organic can still be high in sugar simply because of the drying process itself. One of the most effective strategies I recommend is choosing fresh fruit whenever possible. Fresh fruit contains water, fiber, and volume, which promotes satiety and slow digestion. Eating an apple or orange takes longer, feels more filling, and typically results in a more gradual blood sugar rise compared to dried alternatives. When dried fruits are consumed, portions should be very small and ideally combined with protein or healthy fats to reduce glucose spikes. 5. Smoothies and health shakes. When you drink your calories instead of eating them, do you really know how your body is responding? Smoothies and health shakes are often marketed as convenient, nutritious, and beneficial for weight management, but for individuals managing diabetes, they can quietly create significant blood sugar fluctuations. I frequently see patients who start their day with what they believe is a healthy smoothie made from fruits, milk, honey, oats, or protein powders, yet their glucose readings remain elevated throughout the morning. The issue is not always the ingredients themselves, it is the combination, the quantity, and the form in which they are consumed. When foods are blended into liquid form, the physical structure changes. Chewing plays an important role in digestion and satiety. It slows intake, activates digestive enzymes, and signals fullness to the brain. When you drink a smoothie, that natural slowing mechanism is bypassed. The stomach empties liquids faster than solid foods, allowing carbohydrates to enter the bloodstream more rapidly. This can result in sharp glucose spikes, particularly when multiple carbohydrate sources are combined in one drink. For example, blending banana, mango, milk, and honey creates a concentrated carbohydrate load that the body must process quickly. For someone with insulin resistance, this rapid influx can overwhelm the body's ability to maintain stable glucose levels. Another factor is portion distortion. A smoothie can easily contain the equivalent of 2 or 3 servings of fruit, plus additional carbohydrates from milk or grains, without creating the same feeling of fullness you would experience if you ate those foods separately. Patients often underestimate the calorie and carbohydrate content because the drink feels light and healthy. I have had individuals tell me they consume smoothies daily for weight loss, yet their HbA1c levels remain high because the total carbohydrate intake exceeds what their metabolism can handle efficiently. Protein powders and meal replacement shakes also deserve attention. While some formulations are designed for metabolic health, others contain added sugars, maltodextrin, or artificial flavorings that increase glycemic response. Labels such as energy boost, mass gain, or performance nutrition may indicate higher carbohydrate content than expected. Even natural sweeteners like honey or dates added to smoothies contribute to glucose elevation. The body does not differentiate between sugar sources when it comes to blood glucose impact. What matters is total carbohydrate load and absorption speed. There is also a psychological aspect. Drinking calories often does not produce the same satiety signals as eating whole foods, which may lead to increased hunger later in the day and additional snacking. This pattern can create a cycle of fluctuating blood sugar and energy levels. In contrast, consuming whole fruits, vegetables, proteins, and healthy fats in their natural form promotes slower digestion, better fullness, and more stable glucose patterns. This does not mean smoothies must be completely avoided, but they require careful planning for people with diabetes. Lower carbohydrate options that emphasize vegetables, protein, and healthy fats while limiting high-sugar fruits are generally more suitable. Monitoring blood glucose after consumption can provide valuable insight into individual tolerance. Many patients are surprised to see how dramatically their readings change after certain drinks, which helps them make more informed decisions moving forward. Small daily choices have powerful metabolic consequences. Something perceived as nourishing and beneficial can, in certain circumstances, interfere with glucose control when not structured appropriately. Understanding how liquid nutrition affects the body allows individuals with diabetes to make smarter adjustments that support energy stability, weight management, and long-term metabolic health. Awareness is powerful. When patients begin monitoring their glucose after eating dried fruits, many are surprised by how high their readings can climb. That awareness often leads to better portion control and improved overall glucose stability. Small adjustments in daily food choices can produce meaningful improvements in diabetes management, energy levels, and long-term metabolic health.